What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. We are back today with another Ferrari 412 build video for you guys. For those just tuning into the series, this is a full resto mod of a 1986 Ferrari 412 using that Ferrari 812 superfast engine at its heart. During this build process, we have spent a lot of time and effort to redesign the suspension of the 412. It was one of the most critical areas that we could think of to redesign on this car to make the car drive as we intended. We started off by redesigning the entire front frame section of the car to add this steering rack here to give the car a modern rack and pinion style steering rack. With that done, we set about redesigning the rear suspension, making major modifications to the rear frame to convert this car from a dual shock setup to a single shock setup. With this shock system built, we would need to redesign the rear suspension parts themselves and remanufacture them to accept the new shock tower design. With that said, I'm gonna go ahead and let Steve and Martin show you guys and explain their rear suspension design. Let's get right to it.
So there were a few criterias when it came time to redesign this rear suspension. This suspension is a double wishbone setup, and Steve and I, immediately decided that the pickup points were actually really nice, its original form, And here at OMD, we have an ability to design and make our own uprights and arms. So we wanted to make something that can withstand the horsepower that we're going to be putting on. Another criteria was to run a certain Y width wheel, which these two shock setup was definitely going to be in the way. Just thinking about all those things, Steve and I definitely had to spend some time thinking about how we utilize this space and come up with the best suspension possible. So here are the Ferrari pickup points, old school Ferrari pickup points. This system is actually quite simple and very effective. If you come over here closer, you can see that they use shim method to adjust your rear toe, rear camber, and that sort of thing. So it's actually very simple design, but very effective. So we decided to keep those points. And if you come up, you can see this is our new shock tower. By doing this, we are able to run a singular shock that comes down and connects straight to the upright that Steve is going to be custom building. Because we have an ability to work with the shock company and get exact dampening and spring rate and length that we want, the singular system gonna work great. One major geometry change that we decided was the roll center from the upright. Like I said, Steve has an ability to design it and make it out of CNC in-house at OMD. We decided to change the roll center. You guys can probably all understand that when you lower a factory vehicle, your arm changes, the angle changes, and that was never intended from the factory. So the car ends up riding not as good or bumpy or tracky or whatever. So since we wanted to have a lower ride height than original, we were able to manipulate that from the upright and the arm angle and all that. So I would say that is the biggest change that we changed in the rear. Since now I talked about the basic idea of our rear suspension, I'm gonna hand it over to Steve and he can talk about all the detail work on his design.
Before Steve could set about the actual CAD design for the rear suspension, there was three critical parts that we had to decide on and buy for the car. That was the wheels, the wheel bearings, and the brakes. Now, we had decided that we were going to have custom wheels built for this car, but in the meantime, for design purposes and for testing, we were going to be using these wheels here. These are a set of Volk TE37s. These are 18-inch, which was the absolute biggest that we wanted to go on this car. For the 70s design of this car, big wheels just typically don't look that good, and 18 was the absolute max. One of the biggest positives to using these TE37s is that dimensionally they are one of the best wheels on the market for brake clearance, which is really nice for us, maximizing the braking performance of this car. Another plus for us is that these are actually Steve's personal wheels that he'd already done CAD design of beforehand, which would save us a lot of time having to redesign this entire wheel from scratch. We had decided pretty early on that we wanted to use a 5x114.3, kind of the industry standard for a bolt pattern for modern cars. So the wheel bearing we're going to be using is this wheel bearing. It is a Nissan GTR wheel bearing. One of the great things about this wheel bearing is they hold up really well to power, and for the 789 horsepower this engine produces, this should be more than enough. They are also readily available and not overly expensive as a Ferrari wheel bearing would be. You can see right behind that we've got upgraded stub axles. These are from Drive Shaft Shop. These again are going to be able to hold up to the power that we are going to be putting through this rear suspension. Now pretty early on in the talks about building this car, one of the things that the client asked for specifically was carbon ceramic brakes. Not only would the lightweight brake rotors give a lot less unsprung weight and improve the driving dynamics of the car, but the undeniable cool factor would add a lot to this car and this build. Now, of course, one of the problems in using carbon ceramic brakes in this build is that most modern carbon ceramic brake systems use much larger wheels, 19s, 20s, 21s, even 22s in some cases. We had to do some research on what some of the smallest available carbon ceramic brakes are, and what we actually decided on are these. These brake rotors and the calipers that go with them are from a Ferrari 430, which fit on a 19-inch wheel, but there's enough space that based on our measurements that these will fit in our 18-inch wheels. With all of that decided, Steve could go ahead and work on the CAD design of the rear suspension.
The original rear suspension of the 412 was designed for much narrower and smaller tires. The actual design stemmed all the way back to the 365 that was designed in the late 60s. One of the problems with it is the car has a lot of lean. Because of the lean, they wanted the car to have quite a bit of camber gain, kind of keep the tire as the vehicle itself leans this way and loads this wheel. This wheel then cambers, in negative camber, which kind of keeps the tire flat and straight. One of the first things that we had to do was basically determine all of the motion and geometry of the original 412 system. Once that was done, I made this adapter here. I put the wheel on to the original 412 suspension, and Martin and I looked at where the wheel was, how far out it was. This piece here, this piece actually is just a rough representation of the upright of the original 412. And so all I really needed to do is have a center that would hold the wheel bearing. And this is after the adapter was made and we determined where the wheel needed to be. We then went backwards to the wheel from the spacer to where it would actually be held by this. And this here represents the Ferrari 412 hub. This is the original drive axle. And these are the original points. I could see the range of motion when we tried to move it. And you can see that this one actually has about 11 degrees of camber gain over the course of the normal amount that it would move. And you can see if you bring it down to where it's far, it actually has positive camber at this point. The top of it is leaned out more than the bottom. And then as you push this upwards, you can see that it just starts to lean further and further and further in. And then what I did is we went ahead and designed this. This is the actual upright for our rear. What I did then is I put this into what we wanted it to be our static ride height, and then I locked that in that place so that it could no longer move. You can see how far moved the pickup points are. Now the pickup points are both moved in length and they're slightly closer together, and you can also see too that I made these two pickup points much narrower, and you can see up here I made the top ones a lot wider. This is the lower rear arm. His idea was to actually make this arm actually have an additional like diagonal tie point to tie the front bushing to the back bushing, and you know, I kind of like that idea. It seemed like it would, you know, and the reason that we wanted to have these like kind of double, so you see how it has this one here and this one here, and this one goes to this bushing and this one goes, is because this is the back point. So when the car is pushing forward as that direction, it's going to pull against the collar that's here, and that is going to be the primary thing that pushes the car forward as the wheel goes forward. So his idea was to basically have two connections to the same point to try to strengthen it as much as possible in the direction that it's going to probably see the most force. Now I'm going to go ahead and open up and show you the entire finished assembly. This is our whole assembly finished and done. Okay, so like I said, this was locked in position right about there, and the alignment was set up at what Martin and I decided that we wanted, with the camber and toe and everything exactly as we wanted it. And then once that was in place, I can now show you that this is the range of motion that we are figuring that is going to be the total range of motion with our shock that we're using. And the total camber gain went from about 11.5 degrees to about 3 degrees of total gain. This area of the upper arm was left open to give room for our shock to be. Originally, our two shocks would basically be right here, and them running down, we would have had to have moved this geometry point out here, and that's kind of the problem in this car, is that the original upright, I can't show you in this version, but it would be right here, like right in the middle of that actual wheel. The next step at this point is for me to go ahead and go into each of the individual parts one by one and do the actual necessary work to machine and make the parts.
That's going to be it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. In part 2, Steve is going to set about machining the rear suspension parts, and we'll see you guys then.